Right, so Joe Biden hasn't had the best of weeks. The US is being thrown out of Niger for not eliminating terrorists there in exchange for US troops being allowed to stay in the country, whilst also telling the Nigerian government not to do deals with Russia or Iran or they'll walk away. Well, you're being told to get out, so get going then. Then there's the news that Biden is considering lifting sanctions on an Israeli businessman whose business model seems to basically consist of exploiting the Congolese over the last 3 decades for their mineral wealth. But Biden has to do that because he wants access to that mineral wealth himself. Both these stories I've covered in recent videos. But now where sanctions are possibly getting lifted on a wealthy Israeli rotter, Biden is now talking about imposing sanctions again on someone else, though not on this Israeli chap, nor sadly on Israel itself, which needs a good sanctioning in my view, and I'm sure the view of many others. Now the sanctions are being talked about are set to be placed on India instead, and just like Niger, it comes down to business dealings with Iran yet again, and Biden and his administration throwing a wobbly about it. Right, so Joe Biden is now threatening sanctions on India. Big economy, powerful country, because they've done an investment deal with Iran and the US doesn't like it. And as always, they're throwing their weight around to get their own way, because it still believes that what it says on this planet should go and everyone else should listen to them. It is petulant, weak, and erodes diplomatic relations. Doesn't strengthen them with the US, but frankly, this isn't Biden's part of the world anyway. It has nothing to do with the US, in fact. It has everything to do with India and its issues with Pakistan. And much like Israel and Palestine, the British Empire caused most of the problems here. I'm not going to go into the history of partition, but where people were divided based on ethno-religious grounds to form what is now the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, hostilities ensued over the years between them and India. Not necessarily to the same extent as with Israel and Palestine, as in their case there is disputed territory between them, whereas Israel are intent on ethnic cleansing and seizing occupied Palestinian territories for Israel. That is, if you listen to the hard-right factions of Netanyahu's government, who certainly have been paying close attention to the goings-on in Gaza. India and Pakistan have gone to war with each other on numerous occasions, though, over the likes of Kashmir in the north. Peace treaties have been signed in between. It's always been a case of it's a matter of time before things flared up again. Hostilities have never gone away for very long. Now, India and its decade-long ruling Prime Minister Narendra Modi aren't above reproach in and of themselves either. Modi is an authoritarian. Many ethnic minorities in the country feel persecuted by him. He is ardently right-wing, so you'd imagine he'd get on well with US administrations, and largely he has. However, India is also a founding member of BRICS, so has never sought US approval for its actions and doesn't ask for any now. The original BRICS lineup, after all, forming the original initials, were Brazil, Russia, India and China. So, despite strong Russian links, the US have maintained a relationship with India, but now they are investing in Iran too. Somehow, this is the last straw. Iran is also a member of BRICS now. Where it began with 4 countries in 2006, BRICS is now 9 members strong, with South Africa having joined in 2010, changing the name at that point from BRIC, B-R-I-C, to BRICS as we know it today. And then at the start of this year, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and the United Arab Emirates joined as well. So that BRICS now encompasses some 30% of the planet and 45% of the global population. It is a very significant, if still recent, trade bloc, and it doesn't need the US. More and more, it seems, these countries are putting themselves in a position where they do not need them. They are shunning them. Therefore, with Iran now being part of the bloc, an opportunity to bypass Pakistan for trade opportunities has presented itself to India, which is where we get to the crux of the matters and this video. Right now, in order to have trade negotiations with landlocked Asian countries, the STANs, as they are often colloquially referred to, India has to use Pakistani ports right now. The road to Afghanistan, for example, leads through Pakistan. If you went through the north of India, lies the disputed territories of Jammu and Kashmir, which obviously therefore can't be used. It flares up problems with Pakistan. So it is either through Pakistan via their ports or by road, and obviously that depends on what relations are with Pakistan at any given time. Or the only other alternative is massive detours through China and other STAN countries to get to, for example, Afghanistan. And I single Afghanistan out because they are cited as one of the trade partners India want better access to in a recent Al Jazeera article. Now, Iran lies to the west of Pakistan, shares a border with them, but also does so with Afghanistan. Therefore, a new trade route via Iran would benefit India hugely. As such, India have just signed a 10-year deal to do up Iran's Chabahar port to boost those trade ties with Afghanistan and other landlocked countries beyond. There's been talk of trade that in going via Iran, reaching as far as Russia. Iran also has a border with Turkmenistan, for example, with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan beyond that as well. And obviously Russia is beyond that as well. So you can see the scope for an awful lot of opportunity if India can set up a solid trade route to them. And through Iran is how they're planning on doing it now. You'd imagine India wanting to trade with Afghanistan, the Taliban, therefore, as that would be more of an issue for the US, frankly, than India doing a deal with one of their BRICS trade partners. But no, Iran is the issue. And frankly, at this point and at this time, with the US again moaning about anyone having diplomatic or economic ties to Iran, you automatically question why that is, and at what point this actually becomes all about Israel yet again. Well, the US haven't obviously overtly come out and said that. They do have enough beef with Iran as it is. They do not like them. And indeed, there are plenty of reasons to criticise Iran in and of themselves. But frankly, why should their problem, the US's problem, be anyone else's? It's that old Mandela adage again, why should your enemies be our enemies? And clearly, having been admitted to BRICS, Iran are not seen as the enemy of any of those countries. But sanctions from the US for any other nation dealing with Iran would give them an excuse too, and of course the US will be labelled massive hypocrites if they push ahead with sanctions against India over a trade deal with a trade partner when they still won't sanction Israel while committing genocide. More and more Biden's administration are looking weak as a result of their support for Israel on the global stage. India risks sanctions if they do, bleat the US administration, stamping their tiny feet over it, spitting their dummies, throwing their toys out of the pram. India, for their part, have basically said, grow up. Though the actual wording was that the US should not take such a narrow view of this deal, and they would communicate the benefits of this deal to the US. I dare say the benefits won't matter to them. It's a but Iran moment again for them. This has been a plan for a long time on India's part, though. US sanctions on Iran prevented India going ahead with this back in 2003, apparently. But now they are in the same trade bloc, a new trade bloc that back then didn't exist at all. Well, things are very different now. For one thing, the US will want to continue dealing with India as they are a massively fast-growing economy right now. But if they choose to impose sanctions, they will in effect be cutting their noses off to spite their faces, since India can probably shrug off the fallout and the new deal set to open up to them in inland Asia, landlocked Asia, would probably be seen as a price worth paying if the US can't get over itself. So what is Biden going to do then? If he imposes sanctions on India over Iran, he will lose out more. The US will lose out more. India's economy, booming as it is right now, they'll shrug it off and Biden will just look even weaker than he already does, trying and failing to throw his weight around as the US global influence continues to diminish. If after all of this rhetoric the US doesn't impose sanctions, why should anyone else fear doing business with nations the US don't like? The trouble is if you make threats and don't follow through, you just look weak. If you follow through and damage your own country more, then you just look stupid. It's way past time the US stopped thinking it is the big I am, because especially in light of everything that is happening with regards to Israel and Gaza since October 7th, and the refusal to replace sanctions on them, refusing to allow the UN to take measures via the Security Council, with the US using its veto, the nation seen more and more as the problem, is the US itself. So why should anyone take any notice of their hypocrisy when the biggest elephant in the room right now is their inability or unwillingness, however you like to look at it, to do the right thing by Gaza and by Palestine and its people. If India flipped them the bird at the end of the day, well, they brought it on themselves. Sanctions should be being placed on Israel, yet undermining Biden hugely is the thought of lifting them, as is being mooted in regards to an exploitative Israeli billionaire's interests in the mineral wealth of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Wealth the US needs, which also underlines their vulnerability globally by burning bridges with other big economies like India's, although in this case, it's with China. But find out all about this story in this video recommendation here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.